get started. Recording in progress. So second part today, we're going to be demoing together using the Lecture 6 demo files, Arnold zip folder. We're also going to go over all the requirements, well, most of the requirements in the activity. The only thing I'm going to skip out on is going to be the transmission or glass portion, because we'll get to that on Wednesday. All right, so don't forget that you will be using Project 5, the lighting from Project 5. So I recommend you make a copy of your Maya project folder for the interior and make a copy of your exterior. Change the name to Project 6. This way you've got copies. If anything happens, you can always go back to at least the lighting and get started. Don't forget, save often, save iterations, save versions, save them all over the place. Be a squirrel. Put your acorns in all kinds of different trees. Don't forget that you will need to set your project once you're done, either the interior or the exterior. You'll need to set it to the next one because the scene files are different with different lights, different dome light images also. Okay, now you will be doing for this, you will be doing the long shot and the close-up, but the close-up shot will have a value only render in it. I'll explain that in a second. The long shot's going to be full color. Above your long shot will be the reference for most of the long shot. Above your close-up shot, that will be mostly the reference for just the close-up shot. Now, the reason we're doing a close-up shot is because that's where we're going to see the details of your materials. And when we get into texturing, we'll see the details of your textures. We'll be able to see the quality. We'll be able to see the level of, well, basically just like modeling, the level of detail will be more visible the closer we are. In Photoshop, in the templates for Project 6, I have a special layer set up for the close-up shot that will automatically convert your color render into black and white. So as long as you drop your render and reference in the right place, it will automatically convert that part to black and white. It's called an adjustment layer. So here's what it'll look like. We go down here and let's download the new templates. All right, so let's see. Let's just grab this one. Doesn't matter, they're both the same, just different sizes. So this is the first time that we are not providing reference for you. This is where you will need to find reference yourself. We'll talk about reference in a second, but if you take a look in the layers in the Photoshop templates, there's a folder that says put close-up shot black and white here, put long shot color here. If you drop your color stuff, which is basically your long shot and your reference, into here, they will remain in color. If you drop your close-up shot in this folder, this is an adjustment layer. That little arrow is pinned to this folder, meaning it only affects objects in that folder. So here's what it'll look like. Let me do an open. So which one is this? This is exterior. Okay. See if I have a finished version. The next best thing is, let's take a reference. All right, so let's see. For my close-up, I found this image here because I kind of like the table. It's got a lamp. I like the color of the wood, the reflectivity. I like the environment. The lamp works. The computer works. I can use that. I even like the walls. I like the picture frame. I can use that all as reference for my close-up. Now, you may find a reference image that contains one object you like or multiple objects. Just make sure if you use it as a reference image, make sure you label what you're using inside the image. This way we know, oh, okay, this contains the table, the walls, the picture frame, the lamp. Now, what I'm going to do is just make a copy of this. I'm going to select all, copy it, close it, and I want to paste it into my black and white folder right here. It's a group. So I'm just going to select it and paste. Notice that it automatically turned black and white. So let me just resize this for a little bit, real quick. Now, could take the same image, open that one up again, just to run through this whole exercise again. Here it is, right here. Let's select it, copy it, close it. Now, this time, instead of selecting the black and white reference group, I'm going to select the color. And I want to paste. Notice it is still in color. So depending on where you drop your reference in and or render, it's either going to be black and white or it's going to be color. Does that make sense? So don't sweat about, I don't know how to get a black and white render. You don't have to. As long as you render it out like you normally would, put it in the proper layer, put it in the black and white layer, you should be good to go. Same thing with your render. Let me quit out of Photoshop. Why? Because I want to launch Maya and we're going to have an argument about that. All right, so close-up shot is going to be black and white. The reference is going to be black and white. The long shot is going to be color. Your reference is going to be color. So what you are responsible for is adding materials and color to all elements that are visible in the render, including what is visible in reflections. So for example, you've got a close-up on your interior table. You may not be able to see the sofa or the table next to the sofa, but you can see them in reflections. So they need to have materials on them just like they would in the real world. Now, obviously, I doubt that your kitchen in the interior is going to be visible in a reflection. But if for some reason it is, you'll need to put some materials back there too. You don't need to spend a lot of time on them, but because they're not going to be primary visibility, but they still need to not look like they have default gray on them. Does that make sense? Be sure to clean up any material, light, shadow noise. You've got camera AA, diffuse. You guys know about those. Specular and transmission samples. You're only worried about specular for today. Just remember, you are not applying your reference images as textures. They're only going to be used to get the type of material property. How reflective is it? How rough is it? What color is it? Now, we do provide you with a couple of reference files. We've got the bread and we've also got the thermos. So the bread, I've already got downloaded already. I'm not going to re-download that. This is what the bread looks like. You don't have to use ours, but this is the bread we use to model the geometry in the exterior. This also, believe it or not, is one of the rare occasions where a reference image also can work for a texture image. We'll worry about that in Project 7, but for now, notice that, oh, wait, this is actually pretty complicated look, right? It's not just a solid color. For this exercise, you're just going to get the average color of this bread. You're looking for the material property. The bread may look diffuse, but notice there's a little bit of sheen on it. It's kind of a hard, crusty piece of, or loaf of bread, which means it's not completely dull or diffuse. It's got roughness, lots of roughness, but it's not to the point of being diffuse. Doesn't look like a piece of carpet or a piece of fabric. So, how reflective is it? By default, leave reflectivity all the way up. Adjust your roughness, get it so it has kind of a sheen like this, and then add the color in. I'll show you guys how to use the eyedropper in Maya to sample the color, which will make it a little bit easier from your reference images, or you can just guess too. For the thermos, this is the one that sits on the table. This is brushed metal, stainless steel bottle, brushed metal, horizontal brush strokes, just like my thermal container that I showed earlier, creating vertical stretched highlights, anisotropic material. Basically, white metal, no color in it, but it is metallic. So use this as your guide for creating the thermal bottle on the interior close-up shot on the computer desk. So this is a little plastic ring that separates the top and the body. And honestly, this ring is not really what it seems. It's really an insert for the cap so that you can actually use it as a drinking cup. It's plastic. So this is plastic. All of this is metal. Very hard metal like this. And the cap, or actually this little collar around it, is actually the same material that, I don't have my camera on. And now there's camera. It's basically the same material as this. Fairly rough, little bit reflective. So we give you those because that's what we use to model those objects from. Actually, I give Frank credit. Frank modeled them. All right, so we provide you with the SAL development guide for materials and textures. Please utilize this. Let me zoom in a little. All right. So, as I mentioned, you guys have quite a bit of creative freedom here. You are looking to basically make the objects in your scene the way you want them to look, but you need image reference for it. Photo image reference. Now, like I mentioned, you may find some images that will account for maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces out of your entire environment. That's a good find. The rest you'll have to kind of piecemeal together. Oh, here's my reference for the arm lamps. There's curtains, there's a chair, there's a table, there's TV, there's mug, there's glass. Same thing with the exterior. Now, the purpose of this imagery, this look development, is to provide you with the material properties information for those objects so you can create those materials in mind. All right, so look development images should provide answers to the questions of how reflective is it, how rough is it, what color is it, how transparent. Like I said, we'll get to transparency on Wednesday. So again, your imagery needs to tell you how reflective it is, how rough is it, what color is it. We'll get to transparent objects, metal objects, we'll get into that. We'll get into metal objects, which we already did a little bit of, but we'll get into transparent objects on Wednesday. All right, so some guidelines. You need to find reference images that are at least 1K. That means 1024 by 1024. When you guys go to search for reference images, whatever your search engine, let's go living room. Make sure under tools, I'm using Google, under tools, you want to go size, you want to go large. That will give you at least a 1K image. The bigger the reference you find, the more detail you will be able to see in that image, and the easier it will be to utilize it, because not only are you putting your reference images in a collage above your render, but you're also providing them to us full resolution in a folder. So we can actually open them up if we need to see more detail. All right, so for example, maybe I like the sofa and the pillows, but I hate that floor. I hate the walls. So I would just go, okay, I'm using the pillows and the sofa here for this reference. And then I'll go look for floors. Maybe I can find an environment. Avoid carpet, because that needs to be modeled. Our floors are bare, think wood, tile, vinyl, concrete, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, definitely not that. Definitely not that. And maybe I like this wood floor, so I'll use this wood floor. Or find another one. Maybe I like this one. Oh, and by the way, maybe I like the sofa better here. So now, you know, you can start to find reference images that you like. So the chairs in your interior are those IKEA chairs. I forget what they're called. I have two of them in my house. Pohang, is that what they're called? These things, Pohang. These guys. Yeah, armchair, but that's their Swedish name there. So Frank modeled them after IKEA. The one thing you want to avoid is white backgrounds. These are magical floating matrix backgrounds. We need to have reference that is in an environment so we can see what effect the environment and the light has on the object. Just having it in a white background provides us no visual information. So no. So this one is in an environment. So, oh yeah, there's my wood, the wood for the chairs. There's the fabric here. Do I like anything else? Nah, not really, but at least it's in an environment and that's usable reference. These are not. They tell you nothing other than color. So here, oh, I got wood. Ooh, this one looks kind of leathery. It's a lot more reflective than this or this. This is fabric. Notice the visual difference. Does that make sense? So whichever you decide to do, just make sure that it's clear, you can see, and we can see. Bad reference, cartoony reference, CG. For the exterior, there is a wedge of cheese sitting on the table. On the cutting board, please, no Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese looks awful. It's got to be modeled. You need those holes modeled in order to get the accurate shadows. You can't slop a flat texture on there and go, done. It's going to look like something out of like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. All right, reference too low of a resolution, that means it's too small. If you open it up full size and it's this size, that is way too small. You can't see any detail. Look for other reference. All right, questions? Like I said, Frank and I are going to go over this a little more detail in lab today. But you need to have reference for everything in your scene. Good. First part of lecture is uploaded. I can close that. I'll keep that open. All right, so we do have requirements for glass. So here's now for the interior, you're on your own. For the exterior, if you choose to do the actual Zen garden here at Full Sail, you can use a combination of the reference we provided. Don't forget in project 5, for the Zen garden, we provided you with photo reference. This is what Frank used to model the Zen garden. There's the final shot that we came up with. Camera angle, lighting, everything. So you get an idea. You can use this. You can go over to the Zen garden, take your own photo images if you want. You can see this is wood, that's steel. The trellis itself, steel beams. It's got wooden insets in the front. Acts like a little nice accent. The top is steel. Tables are wood tops, steel legs. Those cushions are not solid colors. They're actually striped colors, which I believe they still have those. If anybody's been over to the Zen garden, I think they're still the same cushions. The chairs, these are metal, but they're kind of coated in this rattan, wicker, weavy pattern. Hard to tell whether it's actual wicker or it's just plastic. It is, but when you get there and look at it, you go, maybe it's not. But honestly, outside, it probably is plasticized. Even if it were wicker, it's probably coated with some kind of really heavy urethane. All right, so you can use these, or if you want to go from scratch, find your own reference. But since you have access to the actual environment, I recommend go take your own photos, use our stuff, work from something that you can actually go and walk around in and see. It's going to make it a lot more personal experience than just using photos of some object a long way away that I'll never come in contact with. So give you an idea of, how we want stuff. Don't forget the close-up shot on the exterior needs to be turned on. I'm sorry, the still life or table setting needs to be turned on for the long shot and the close-up. All right, questions? All right, so let me download the Lecture 6 demo files here. All right, there we go. Let me fire up Maya. All right, we're going to be rendering. I'm going to turn off my video. This way I can put reference on the right. All right, so set your project first. Yep, that's good. Let's hit set. It's going to be the helix sphere Arnold. There is no book, or I should say there are bookmarks, but there is no render cam. The camera itself is not locked. So if you move it, don't worry about it. You can just render it wherever you want. But if you want to get back to the initial position, just go to view, bookmarks, and it'll snap you back here. All right, this already has light in it. It's got a dome light with an image, and it also has a directional light. The only thing we're going to do right now is assign a AI standard surface to the ground and another AI standard surface to the helix and the sphere. Those two are going to share the same, but the ground is going to have its own. So select it, Shift T. Assign that default surface. And let's make the base weight value. Let's bring that down to 0.18, just like we did for the exterior and the interior. Now, select the helix and the sphere, assign a new material to those, Shift T. They're going to share the same material. We're going to use an AI standard surface. And honestly, I'm going to rename this one Helix Sphere, so I know what it is. So once you've got that made, take the base value, drop that down to 0.18 also. So now we've got all our objects that have the same material property. And let me rename this material so I know it's the ground. All right, I'm going to open up my Arnold render view and let's just render, see what we get. May take a second to render till it builds that image. There we go. All right, so notice they have exactly the same material, but look at the reflectivity in the helix and sphere, since we're looking at them directly, and then look at what you see on the ground. They've all got the same reflectivity, the same base color, and even the same roughness. Now, for our ground, we're going to leave that at the default, but we are going to play with the helix and the sphere. So make sure you have one of those selected, either the helix or the sphere, doesn't matter. And let's take our specular roughness and turn it down to 0. Specular roughness, turn it down to 0. Now you should be able to see a little more detailed reflection in the helix and the sphere. You guys see that? All right, so right now we've got, even though it's 0.18 value, it's still pretty light. We've got a lot of, well, we've got the base reflectivity turned on, and we've got no roughness. So let's turn the base color, let's dial that down so it gets darker and darker. Notice as it starts to get darker, it actually looks like it gets more reflective. I haven't changed the amount of reflectivity. It's just that that darkened color makes it look more reflective, like it can reflect more of the environment. Notice if the base color value is really high, it gets blown out. You can basically not see any reflection. Turn that up, and pure white, burn your eyeballs. All right, so I'm going to drop it down. Let's see, how low do I want to go? I don't know. I'm just going to go to like 0.02, 0.025. So very reflective. Let's see what happens when you take the specular weight and start to drop it down. As you start to bring it down right around 0.5, it looks a little duller, but it's still got quite a bit of reflectivity in it. Drop it down even more. It's starting to take on almost a diffuse look. Not quite, it's still got a little reflectivity in there. Turn the weight down to 0. Now you've got a really dark, diffuse material. Now, also take note that the specular weight, look what it does to the very edge of the material, right up here. As I turn it down, it lessens that edge a lot. And then it starts to affect the 0 degree. But that edge is very bright. Notice if I drop it down around half, the edge is a lot less reflective, but the 0 degree portion is still fairly reflective. Not until you start to drop it down even more that the 0 degree starts to go away. Does that make sense? Questions? So the default material specular settings that you get give you quite a bit of reflectivity. Now, I'm going to leave it up at 1. Let's play around with roughness. So at 0, a lot of details in the reflections. Now, you'll notice that the ground plane reflection, that sun that I have in there, the directional light, is blurred out. That's because we're seeing a reflection off of a rough ground plane. Now, as I start to turn up the roughness, my light starts to spread out. It starts to break up. My reflections become a lot softer. I get around 0.1. That's pretty soft compared to that. Get around 0.2, which is what the default is. That honestly is pretty rough. So this is 0 roughness, 0.1, and then 0.2. You can really see the difference. Start to get into 0.3. Now, everything starts to get very impressionistic, if you will. A lot of blobby shapes. 0.4. That highlight really breaks up. So 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. Our reflectivity is starting to break up to the point where it's beginning to be hard to tell what is a reflection and what is just blurry light. You get around 0.5 and it's really hard to see anything other than the direct light itself. Now, some people say, well, if you turn up the roughness all the way, don't you get a diffuse material? You would think that you would, but if I turn roughness up all the way, take a look at that. That doesn't really look like a diffuse material. It almost looks like it's velvet or suede. Yeah, something like that. It's got reflectivity in it, but it's not quite a diffuse material. So a diffuse material would basically look like this. I turned my specular weight all the way off. Compare that with roughness turned all the way up. Roughness turned all the way up. Specular weight turned off. This is diffuse. You're still getting quite a bit of light reflecting off of that object. So again, there's your suede, there's your felt, there's your, powder coat on a material. And then this is diffuse, what we've been dealing with. So turning roughness all the way up does not give you a diffuse reflection. All right, does that make sense? So those are your controls. Those are actually the base controls for pretty much anything other than metal and glass. Plastic, concrete, carpet, wall, fabric, tabletops. All right, so let's go see if we can't try to get as close as we can to creating the material property for, say, the back of my mouse here. And let's do this. All right, so to create this, let's reset our material. So by default, you're going to get a roughness level of 0.2. And you're going to get a base color of, well, 0.8, which looks like that. That's your standard Arnold. Here's what I get out of the box when I assign it. So obviously, it's going to be hard to put in reflectivity if your color is too bright. Plus, we know this is dark. So let's make it darker. Now, how much roughness is there? There's some distortion here. This is kind of a semi-spherical object that's reflecting back at us. But how blurry are those reflections? Yeah. They're pretty sharp. Now, honestly, nothing is perfectly smooth and perfectly reflective, even glass or a mirror or chrome. It's always going to have just a tiny bit of roughness. But for this, if I lower, say, the roughness down to 0.1, honestly, that's probably still a little too rough. About 0.05, I'm just trying to knock it down. Doesn't look like my lights spread all that much. I don't know. For this, I might start somewhere around 0.02. It's got a little bit of roughness in it, but not a ton of it. So all I'm trying to do is get a rough idea of where I am with this. So as long as you understand how roughness works, you can kind of dial that in and start working on your other properties. Now, as far as the amount of reflectivity, well, we're turned up to 1. The only other thing I could do is turn up metalness, but honestly, that's going to make it look like metal. And that does not look like metal, it just looks like plastic. However, something that I do think will help, which we experimented earlier, is if you make the base value color a little darker, go down to like 0.02, that really makes it quite a bit more reflective. Now, obviously, we're never going to match it perfectly because this is a sphere in an open outdoor environment. We got sky, it's during the day. This is in a bleak, dreary cubicle office. I got a light in there and my nearest window is 15 feet away. So it's not going to look the same, but what we're looking for is how much of a reflection can we see? How blurry is it? And do we have the right base color to try and match it? Honestly, I think our base color could be a little darker. So let's drop it down just a little bit. Now, instead of trying to use this slider, I actually like to open up the color picker and just use the value slider. We drop it down to like 0.01. Now it's really taking on quite a dark look. So now I have to decide, okay, how much reflectivity is there? Well, if I look at it, it looks like it's pretty reflective. I'm looking at the edges. They're pretty reflective like they are here. If I drop this down too much, it's going to look like that. Now for this, if I drop it down a little bit, it may knock down some of that brightness on the edges. But I won't know until I actually try. Let me delete all these. Come on. Really? Stay. No. Stay. Okay, tablet pen is wigging out on me. There we go. Delete, 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 delete. Okay. So let's keep this one. And let's see how it looks if I drop down the specular weight a little. Let's go down to 0.8. So you can see it knocks a little bit of that front reflection down and also some of the edge reflection. Is that what I'm seeing here? Maybe. It may not be. Like I said, it's hard to tell. This is in a darkened office. Maybe that's too much. Let me bump it up. 0.85. Is that any better? It still knocks it down a little. Anybody come up with a number they like better? So this is 0.1 default amount of reflectivity, and knock this down to 0.8. All I'm trying to do is get ballpark, having that look sort of like that. 0.6, let's try 0.6. Let's take a screen of this first. And then do 0.6. All right, so here we have 1, 0.8, 0.6. So looking at the edge here, that's not bad. Let's keep that. Let me see what 0.7 looks like. Yeah, either one could do it. Let's try 6.5. All right, so okay, either one of those will work. All right, let's do this. So whenever we start switching materials, I always like to turn my Arnold material back to the default, or you can just reassign a brand new Arnold material to it. So I'm just going to go back, put my base weight value to 0.8, turn that all the way up. Let's go roughness of 0.2 and render it. So this is what you get if you assign a brand new Arnold material. So first thing, way too bright, meaning it's the base color value. Let's drop that down. Go 0.18, still a little too dark or a little too light. Drop it down. All right, now the amount of reflectivity, that's going to be a little hard to gauge until you get the level of roughness in there. So do we need more roughness, less roughness? What do we need here? Okay, anybody got a number they tried? So it's rough, but I can still see some blurry colors. There's my laptop, there's my charger on the bottom right. You can see the light here. I can see reflections back here a little bit. So they're not completely just blurry blobs. There's a slight bit of definition. Well, let's try increasing it. Let's try 0.3. What I'm looking for is trying to get that light to spread out. It's still a little focused, but it really is much softer on the edges. 0.6. I think we may have overshot. About 0.5. See, what happens is if you blur this too much, if you make it too rough, you are diffusing those reflections a whole lot. Yeah, let's see 0.4. Now that's not bad. That's a pretty good mix between having a little bit of a focus of the light inside and have it soften on the edges. I can still see a little bit of the sky and some of the background, but not much. It's very impressionistic. Now, as far as color goes, what do we need? Say again? Yeah, I would kind of go with that. So that's 0.75. Well, let's just try 0.05. And again, it's hard to tell. This is kind of falling off from the light because it's curved downwards. So it's probably going to be somewhere up here. All right, we're getting closer. So we already know 0.5 is too rough. About 0.45, is that still too rough? Let's see, let's save this. 0.45. Yeah, I think that's too rough. How about the amount of reflectivity now? What's that? Yeah. Well, if I drop it down, it is going to make it a little darker. Then it starts to look a little flatter. This is still pretty reflective. So we might be able to get away with keeping the weight all the way up And just having adjusted the amount of roughness is really going to knock down how reflective it looks also. Does that make sense? So when you guys are looking at your materials, this is kind of the workflow you want to look at. You want to look at, first off, can I see reflections in it? Or is that default Arnold too bright? Chances are default Arnold is going to be way too bright. Turn down your default base color value, turn it down to something a little darker and work from there. Remember, nothing will be absolute black, nothing will be absolute white. All right. So let's reset this back to the default and let's try for that rubber grip on the side. So there's our default Arnold color. Now for this, all right, so where should we start here? That's our goal. So this is a default Arnold material. You throw it on there, that's what you get. This is what it looks like when we render. Yeah, I want to be able to see some reflections. Right now, it's just polar bear in a snowstorm. So yeah, let's knock it down. Now, how dark is it? Probably not as dark as that, not as light as that. Let's go down to good old Unreal charcoal and start there. All right, so here we are. We've got the base color lowered enough. Where should we go from here? Specular weight. Why are you adjusting specular weight first? Just curious. So here is the light highlight. That. So what do we need to do to get our light to break up like this? That's the roughness. Yeah, so I would adjust the roughness first before you do the specular weight, because the roughness is going to decrease the amount of reflectivity. So personally, I find it easier to do the roughness, and then if I think it's too much on the edges and everywhere else, just turn it down a little and adjust it visually to what you see. But if you try to adjust this, it's not going to do anything to your highlights. So let's start with this. I mean, that was like what, 0.4? So let's turn 0.4, see what we get. Probably not enough. Let's go 0.5. That might honestly be a little too much. because it's still got a little more focus here than it does there. So I don't know, maybe 0.45 could be a little higher. 0.47. All right, let's try that. I like that. Sounds like a good number. Ooh, yeah. Nice. Now, looks like it needs to be a little darker. So let's try and drop that base weight value down. Let's go a little darker. It's getting a little more like rubber, but honestly, that edge is really pretty bright right around here. So now that we've got it dark enough, we've sort of got it roughed in for the, well, we have an approximate amount of roughness. Let's knock down the specular weight, because that's going to take the whole thing and make it a little darker still. So let me just take a screen of this. Not two, just one. There we go. And let's drop the weight down a little. And remember, dropping down the specular weight is going to affect the edges also. So that's specular weight all the way up. This is specular weight knocked down. Do we need more? Do we need less? What do you see visually? This is with the default specular weight of 1. I think that's way too high. Knocking it down a little helped. This right now is at 0.6. It knocks some of that edge off up here. It's really pretty bright. Did we go too far? Did we not go far enough? Yeah, it is. When you start getting this hard, this close, sometimes it's a good idea. Just let it sit for a bit, come back to it. All right, let me get rid of this one because I think that one is way too high. All right, so there is the back of our mouse, the hard plastic. Not bad. There's the top, the mouse button. And here is the rubber. So all off the same, well, the same material. Arnold is kind of like the Swiss Army knife of materials. With it, you can do pretty much anything, even human skin, which you guys saw. That's what we used for the subsurface scattering for the portrait. All right, question. Does that make sense? All right, let's get some reference and do metal now, because we've done plastics, rubber. Let's do metal. So what kind of metal should we do? And let's start off with white metal first. I don't want to do anything like copper or brass yet. I want to show you what white metal is. Iron? Iron Man? So not great reference because it's not in an environment, but you get an idea of just how dull iron's going to be. So steel is actually not iron. It's iron and isn't it cobalt or what is iron? Iron is a base element, but then steel is iron and carbon. So iron by itself is going to be a little bit different than steel. Don't want steel. And apple, you're lying. Cast iron. That's pretty good. Don't forget when you are looking for reference, and I broke my first rule, go under tools, size, large. This way you're not chasing yourself if you find a great reference and open it up and it's only a postage stamp. That does you no good. So bolts, they're not bad. Kind of look like a pile of puppies. All right, well, let's see if we can get this. All right, so iron. We're going to make iron. I'm going to assign a new material to these objects. So going to select both the helix and the sphere, Shift T, Arnold, AI surface, and let's call this one iron. Not Erton, iron. There we go. All right, so if we're going to do this, I need to find out what are the reflectance properties of iron, because I want to make it metal. So let's go to our trusty refractive index database. Iron, iron, iron. Isn't iron like Ne or something like that? No, that's neon. Fe, thank you. There we go. I knew it was an E. Couldn't remember what it was. All right, so Fe, very good, thank you. And let's go down to the reflective properties. So the 0 degree reflection base color is going to be 0.520. So down here, let's plug in 0.520. Now, for the 90-degree angle, 90 degrees, look, it is at 1. So the default color in the specular, this is our 90-degree, that is 1. There's a value of 1. So now, let me hit the render button. Well, that doesn't look much like iron. No, it doesn't. Because now we need to take our metalness slider and turn it all the way up. When you turn the metalness all the way up, now it starts to behave like metal. So we found reference, we assigned a new material, we got the reflectance properties or the reflectance properties from the index of refraction website. We've got them in there. And now we want to start trying to make it look sort of like this. Now, this looks like pretty unpolished iron. So this is probably iron in its best state. But we want to make ours look like the reference here. So looks like our base color's got to be a little bit darker. Now, the best way to achieve that would be ideally to be able to take this image and sample the color for it, which in Maya you can if you click on the color picker and use the eyedropper. That might let you come over here and then you can sample the colors, or I should say the color for your iron. You don't want to go into a really light part or into a super dark part. You want to be somewhere around in the middle. Now, the problem with this is I'm going outside of Maya to try to sample the color, and it doesn't always like it. But I will try it. A little too brown over there. Let's try this. It's a little too green in color. So if I'm not happy, what I'm going to do is try and download this image. All right, let's save image. Will it let me? No, it's a web graphic. I hate you. Okay. Well, let's see if I can open it in a new link. What is cast iron? All right, so apparently that's not a very good reference. What about this one? Can I save this one at least for the color? Save as. Ooh, yes. That's a JPEG. Ooh, ooh, ooh. JPEG's good. Well, at least for reference. All right, so I've downloaded it to my desktop right here. So let's see if we can grab that. Now, One of the easiest ways to do this is to not use the simple color picker, because in Maya, if you click once on your color swatch, that's going to bring up the simple color picker, but it goes away after a couple of seconds. If you double click on the color swatch, that brings up a free floating advanced color palette. Now, in this advanced color palette, you'll see that we've got a section down here called Color Wheel. There's an image tab, and we can load the reference image in. And there we are. And now, if I left click with my mouse, I can go around and sample my color anywhere. Now, this metal's got a little green tinge to it, but I'm just going to take that out. I think it's picking up color from the environment in there, reflecting back. So what I'm going to do is just grab the value information that I got, which was around 0.2. When you're done with this, make sure you click done so it goes away. If you leave it open, it's liable to think you want to change stuff. So it's going to keep changing things. All right, so we did that. Let's open our reference up. And how rough is this? Pretty rough. Take a look at that. You can even see how rough it is. It's got visible roughness in there. So let's crank this up. Let's make it a little darker. Now, you can see the edges are kind of bright, but we're going to have to darken our edges just a little also. Now, the thing that really helps make this is you can see all of the imperfections in this. A lot of this is a result of height differentiation. You can see the little indentations that create shadow. You can see the little areas that are raised up that creates the highlights. If we ignore that and just try and look at this image, what we need to do is try and get this to be a little bit darker. Now, honestly, this almost looks like it's anisotropic because there's a stretched highlight here on the sides. So maybe we try to make it anisotropic. Notice as I turn it up, it stretches that highlight out. But I really want my highlight to rotate. So let's bring it up somewhere like 0.25 is a 90-degree rotation. And now it's starting to look a little bit like that iron because this actually is anisotropic because of all the imperfections in it. Does that make sense? Now, had this been a polished piece, we probably wouldn't need anisotropy. Now, something else we could do is add just a little bit of darkness into the color on the edges, but I really wouldn't go too much. Or just drop the weight down a little. Now, maybe that's too much anisotropy. I can kind of bring that down a little bit. And all I'm trying to do is match what I see here. It's pretty rough. Maybe it's a little rougher than I see here. That's too rough. Got a little bit of a highlight in there. Maybe it needs to be a little bit darker still. Drop this down a little bit more. Just try and match that. All right, does that make sense? All right, now, for metal, I've got a slide for you guys that is basically the recipe for making metal. So what I will do is I will take a screenshot of this and send it to everybody in an FSO message. If you're watching this in the archive and online, just stop the video, make sure you're watching it HD, and take a screenshot of it. All right, making metal. Go into FSO. Let's go to peoples and message the whole class. All right, so everybody should be getting a happy little message very shortly on the Secret Society of Metal Making. All right, questions? Does that make sense? All right, the one other thing I wanted to show you was, let me kind of show you what I like to do if I am bringing a reference image or I'm using a reference image and I'm trying to work in Maya and I know it's going to be something that's going to be pretty visible. So what I want to do is demo how I would use that table reference that I had for the interior computer table, how I would use that reference and build the material in Maya. So first thing I want to do is, let me get my reference going. And I think I've got interior, let me see. There's Maya. Let me save this. And let me set my project. Lesson 6, interior Maya. There we go. And let's do the interior day because that's what mostly I'm assuming everybody did, right? Interior day. All right, so here is the desk that I want to do. Let me just do a quick render, make sure all my stuff is showing up here. Let's do the desk. Make sure my lighting is okay. Missing anything? Doesn't look like it. Yep, nope, image is there, we're good. Okay. So went on the interwebs and found this table, which I really like because it's about what I have for the computer table. And it's almost at the same angle that my render's at. Like my viewing angle in the render cam is about the same as this. Now, when you guys are working with materials, you may not have this. And your object may be at a different angle. Go into perspective and render your object at the same, roughly the same camera angle that your reference shows. So you can see how the reflectivity looks. Then go back to the camera and see what it looks like. So I'm looking at this. This is like a 60-degree viewing angle. So it's looking pretty reflective. Notice when I look at it straight on, I'm not seeing a lot of that reflectivity, but I am seeing it on the top of it. Now, when I'm working with this, I don't care about the color right now. What I'm interested in is getting the amount of reflectivity and the roughness. And I don't want to be distracted. I just want to get a value in there that looks roughly like what my reference has. So let me do a save as here. So I'm going to select my table. first thing I want to do is obviously assign a new material. It's going to be an Arnold AI standard surface. Always rename your materials. If you don't rename your materials, you're going to drive yourself crazy. You're not going to know what AI standard surface 1 is from AI standard surface 74. You're going to have a ton of them in there because every object needs to have its own reference. So here's the thermal container. That little plastic collar is going to be a different material from the cap or the body. The mug, that's all one piece. This is a bottle. This is going to be glass. But notice the lamp has got several different components. But the table is all one piece. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about having metal drawers. These are just little cutouts and you just pull the drawer out. All right. So I've got a new AI standard surface in there. I'm going to keep the default reflectivity. And let's see what the default base weight looks like. The color, yeah, that's really bright. All right, so first thing I want to do is I like to work in, it's not very sophisticated, but the Mac preview program. The nice thing about this is if you go up to tools, go to adjust color, you can actually take the color out simply by turning the saturation all the way off. Now, I'm not going to close this because I don't want to save it like that. I'm just going to hit reset all when I'm done and close it, and then I won't lose my color. But now all I want to do is now I can see, okay, it needs to be darker so I can start working. How dark? Well, let's drop it down to 0.18. Is that dark enough? I don't know. Well, I got a denoiser in there. I don't think that's going to bother me. Oh, yeah, that's going to hurt. Let's not do that. We turn off the denoiser. And I'm just going to crop it because really all I care about is this area right here. Right there. So now what I want to look at is, how's my value look here? Well, it's still pretty bright. Let's drop it down even more. All right, so a little bit darker. This is my base level of reflectivity. So the way reflections work is just like a shadow, close to the reflection source, the base, it's always going to be a little more detailed. And as it gets further away from the base of the subject, it's going to start to get less and less detailed. It's going to start to break up. And you can see it here. Right now, as far as me grabbing the average color, that looks pretty close, but I can always bring this image into Maya and sample the value if I want to there. I can double click, go here under the advanced color picker, color wheel, image, hit load. Let me go find my reference, which I have in my folder here. Right there. And let's sample the color. Now you can see I'm sampling it, but that looks a whole lot brighter than what I have. So sometimes sampling doesn't always give you what you want because that is much brighter than what I'm seeing here. So remember, my goal is to make it look like this. So I'm going to go back to adjusting it manually. And I'm basically just trying to get it to look like the reference here. Now, at this point, I can go in and what would I want to do? I've kind of got the color. The color might be a little bright still. Remember, I'm not going by my color swatch. I'm going by what it looks like in my render compared to my reference. So if it needs to be a little darker, I can make it a little darker. Now, I would go in and adjust, well, the roughness. Does it look a little more rough or less rough than my reference? All right, so let's try bumping it up. So I went from 0.2, which is the default in Arnold, to 0.3. Well, I can save that. And let's try 0.25. Let's split the difference in the middle. See which one works better. I'm not worried about quality right now. I'm just trying to get. So this one is a little bit rougher than that one. Which one looks closer? Which one? This one? All right, so let's go back to 0.3. Well, we can try 0.4. What's that going to do? Yeah, I think that's way too rough. So let's go back to 0.3. I think that might be golden. So now, do I need to adjust the amount of reflectivity? Well, I'm looking at the 0 degree, which is in the front. That looks about the same. Looking at the top, that looks about the same. The color, maybe it's still a little bright. Let me drop it down a little more. I'm just trying to get the value in there. So once I'm happy with that, now I can go in. Let me save this. Now I can go back and make this color again. And now I can grab the color off of it. And now I've gotten all my other features done and I'm not distracted by the color. Now I can go back and go, all right, now it needs to be brownish. And what I want to do is keep an eye on my value here, because if I sample this for color, it's going to come in really bright. So let me bring up my advanced color picker. How do I do that? Yeah, double click on the color swatch. Nope, 1, 2 clicks. No, stop. There we go. So let me reload my reference because I just got rid of the color on that one. There we go. So now let's start sampling the color. I'm going to click done. And let's render that out. Whoa. So remember what I said about the value. Let's bring that value down. Let's bring it down even more. I think I had it at 0.025. So it looked good. Too much? Yeah, maybe. Let's bring it up to 0.3. And this is also where you can adjust it. Just because you sampled it off of the color picker and off of the image doesn't mean that it's going to look that way in your render. So once you sample the color, feel free to adjust the hue, which is the actual color itself, the saturation, which is the dominance of that color. Maybe the color needs to be a little more saturated, a little more red. No, maybe not. And if you're not happy with it, just go back and resample it again. Get a little more orange in there. Yep, we can do that. So just keep playing around with the color till you get it. And again, I'm trying to get the average color between the actual grain of the wood and the main body of it. Just trying to get an average color in there. You can always go back, reset it, fix it, whatever you want to do. All right, does that help? Questions? Anybody have questions? All right, so thermal container there, that would be brushed metal. It is stainless steel. Unfortunately, there is not a setting in the refractive index for stainless steel. But if you take a look at titanium, titanium has the same, well, reflectance properties as stainless steel. So that's always something you can do. So how do I know that? Well, you go to the internet and you ask the great Oracle Google. There we go. Index of refraction, stainless steel. There they are. That's the refractive index extinction coefficient. That's pretty close to what this is, which is titanium, which means you can use 0.598 for the 0 degree, which is your base color. And then, of course, 90 degree, which is your specular color, can be 1. Did everybody get the message with the making? Okay, good. All right. If there, well, first off, any questions before we adjourn for lunch, dinner, breakfast, snack, whatever it is? Okay. Thanks for hanging in there. A lot of information. Like I said, start gathering reference. Pick one of your scenes, start working on it little by little, piece by piece. Work on one piece at a time. Work on the big stuff first if you want. Save the little stuff for later. It's all up to you. All right, so let's go to lunch, dinner, whatever it was we talked about, and come back at 6 o'clock. 6 p.m.